our Excellence Open Hour on this Friday morning, Rethinking Leadership Development. The wonderful Kay Tier is going to be speaking with you all this morning. Kay is founder and managing director of Business Reimagined, who are one of our members, and Kay has hosted several events for us, both virtual and face-to-face, with lots of success. So I'm really, really pleased to welcome you along, Kay, this morning to discuss with us some new research and some new thinking that you're I was going to say involved in, but sort of aware of and learning about. So really appreciate your time. Are you happy if people have questions throughout for them to pop their hands up or interject, or do you want to wait till the end?
Yeah, you can put them in the chat so that we capture them, okay. But I'll probably go through the presentation and then we'll get them at the end if that's okay. So,
absolutely fine. So yeah, if you've got a question, pop it in the chat or hold on to it until the end, and then we'll do some Q&A to finish off with. Okay, so without further ado, thank you all very much and big welcome to Kay.
Hi and welcome everyone. I want to start by telling you about a time in 2010. I was living in Melbourne, Australia, and I was working as a consultant for a global management consultancy. So somebody had written in on through the website and said, we're interested in leadership development. And it was assigned to me to go and meet the client, a lovely lady called Liz, who worked for a travel consultancy. So I went to meet Liz and, of course, got to know her. You know, what is it you need? Why now? They'd been having some challenges with attrition and, had a few challenges with the engagement scores, not being a bit low around leadership development. So I said, fine. So then we start to get into the more kind of nitty gritty questions. So I said, have you ever run a leadership development program before? And they said, yes. 2 years ago, we ran a leadership development program, quite a big program, and every manager went through it. And I said, okay, that sounds good. How much did you spend on that program, if you don't mind me asking? And she said it was 250,000 Aussie dollars. So at the time, that's about 130,000 pounds. So I said, wow, that's a big investment. What changes did you see as a result of that program? And then the tumbleweeds started rolling on. And it was nothing, no impact. And that stayed with me really from my career, since 2010, saying, how can it be that companies are investing this amount of money and not seeing the return? So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Kay Tier. I'm the founder of Business Reimagined. Business Reimagined is a women-owned business. So if any of your organisations are interested in ethical procurement, then feel free to have a look at We Connect International or Women Owned, or feel free to get in touch with me and ask me more. In this session, I'm going to be sharing some research that you probably haven't heard on before. I'm going to share some practitioner perspectives and my ideas for continuous improvement. So really keen to hear your ideas as well when we get to the Q&A. Continuous improvement is something I've really been working on a lot more in my business, especially since I've been involved with the BQF. So just as a quick history, and why am I here talking to you about this, and do I have the credentials? Yes, I'd like to say I do. I've worked as a business psychologist. I'm an author, a senior leader, a business owner, and I've worked at 5 different management consultancies, all for about 3 years. So I spent 15 years working for consultancies, getting to know their frameworks. And what I found is that no one was really doing anything wildly different. And I guess that stands to reason, because when we look at best practice, that seems to say, let's all do the same thing. But it wasn't having these particularly amazing results. So when I started my own business, I thought, right, this is something that I can really start to work on. And I would say, by the way, that it is difficult to measure impact of things where there are people involved, because us people, we're a bit tricky. We're all different. We've all got our own inner world that makes us very different. So it's very hard to get a baseline, but, we can try. And since I've been working with the BQF, we've been a finalist in the last 2 awards, in the 2023 awards for the Excellence in People, Engagement and Development, and at the awards earlier this year, finalists for the Mental Health and Wellbeing Award. So again, straddling both of those sides of L&D and wellbeing, and I'll be telling you a bit more about those programs as we go through. So let's dive in and start to look at leadership development and the problem that we're facing as I see it. So one of the most recent pieces of research that I could find, I'm always curious to see how much learning of programs actually goes back on the job. And this piece of research says that only 27% of learning goes back. So 73% doesn't. And like I say, a lot of you in continuous improvement, if you ran something and it was 27% effective, I think you'd be pretty unhappy with those results, I'm guessing. So I want to talk through 4 points. Again, they're not that only 4 points, but 4 points as I see them that's having a huge impact on this. And the first one is overloaded leaders. So work is busier than ever. You know, if I go back to my first job, I started in the management consultancy in 2006, so it's almost 20 years ago. And life was just a bit calmer then. You know, people were, they had things to do, but they had time. And what I see, especially now, it's, back-to-back meetings, it's, too many priorities changing, going through transformation. And that doesn't include what's going on at home. Home is busy. There's things to do, children, parents, the economy, financial pressures. So, of course, is it any wonder that we're overloaded? The World Health Organization estimates that $1 trillion is lost every year because of mental health. And a recent statistic from this year from Glassdoor found that in Q1 there was an increase of 32% in mentions of burnout. So what is causing this? Well, in the coaching that we run, we've seen lots of different reasons, but you may recognize some of these problems in yourself or your teams, and don't need to worry too much about this. But I think that this image of the waltzer really seems to fit, when I talk to people, because it's, we're sleep deprived. If we're sleep deprived, that makes us unmotivated. Then we're chronically distracted. We've got the pop-ups coming up, the phone, the back-to-back meetings, we're overscheduled. And of course, is it any wonder from this mindset that it's hard to take on learning when it comes to leadership development? So that's just at an individual level, but then let's layer on the pressures of work that we have. And again, these are just some of the things that come up when we do research interviews with the businesses that we work with. And again, think about your own business, and does any of this relate? It's hierarchical. There's an excess of meetings or emails. It's complex and confusing. Perhaps you're going through transformation, and yet there's transformation because things are siloed. People are working in a reactionary way. So again, it can be any or all of some of these things that are all, again, impacted on how overloaded leaders are feeling. And again, this image behind this whack-a-mole, that if people are feeling like I'm just constantly having to go and fight all of these issues, it's no wonder that people are starting to feel overloaded. So given that people are overloaded, how much do we think they're actually going to retain if they go on a leadership course? That's the big question for me. And of course, this research shows that probably not a lot, because not a lot of training goes back and is translated on the job. So the second point, outdated training models or approaches. Now, I spent a long time towing the line. I would work for companies and I was junior, and then you're told what to do and you go and design or simply deliver programs that other people have designed, which is fine. But how much has actually changed in 20 years? And I'll be honest, I don't think that much has really changed. So let me ask you, if we think about that statistic of learning that doesn't translate back on the job, have a think right now, and you can write in the chat or just think of it to yourself. Have you ever sat through leadership training that you didn't find useful? Now, I don't mean the whole training, because people are usually pretty nice and appreciate the reflection, but I just mean, have you ever sat in training and you've thought, this isn't relevant, either relevant to my job or to me personally? Maybe I already knew it. So, let us know there in the chat. And when you look at adult learning theory, now this has been around for a long time, research by Knowles, they saw that training has to be really relevant. I was just with a friend actually last week. She works for an investment bank, big leadership development program, and she's been out the office for 3 days doing an on-site program. And she said to me, 3 days is all well and good, but no one's covering my work back home, and really all I'm thinking about is the monstrosity of an inbox that I'm going to have to deal with probably every evening this week. So it really takes away from going on this lovely course. So there we've got overwhelmed, we've got overwhelmed, and we've got here now outdated training. Is it useful for people to be going on this much group training? That's the question that I'm really asking myself. And now I want to go on and have a look at a couple of different ones. This lack of tangible business ROI. 57% of L&D leaders feel increasing pressure to prove ROI, as they should, if you ask me. I think that L&D and HR can sometimes be the most kind of disconnected from business objectives. And if you're doing it well, brilliant, that's great. But I've worked for a lot of organizations, all over the world. And I find that leadership programs, they don't seem to be very tangible. And I have a couple of ideas of how we can change this, that some of them still being piloted. So just FYI. But I want to get to this fourth point, because there's a piece of research, well, there's about 10 years of research, to be honest, but about the inaccuracy of competency measurement. Now, when it comes to leadership development, we really rely on competencies, if you think about 360s, development centers, and actually current research shows that it's not very accurate. So you're probably familiar, I would guess, with a competency framework, and just reflect on your own one. So they're usually created by HR to give a set of standards that people need to be aware of for their jobs, and they can be leveled. So it can be, kind of administrative level, leader level, senior leader level, and there can be even more than that. But what I think is important to know is how they're designed. And then we can really start to think about how scientific is it really? Because when you look at anything in terms of organizational psychology and measurement, you're really wanting two things to come out. So you want to check that it's valid, so it's measuring what it says it's going to measure, and that's reliable, so it consistently gets the same result every time it's measured. So here is an example of just one behaviour that was just available online. Nothing against the GLA, by the way, it's just one that I found online. So this is a level 1 frontline administrative level staff. So I think probably one that we can all relate to. And I want you to just have a read through these indicators. The behaviour is building and managing relationships. And have a look through these behavioural indicators and think, is there anything that kind of jars a little bit, or you feel isn't reflective of this level, or do you think there's anything missing? So just have a look at that and tell me what you think. And I wonder, Carrie, if you could read out in the chat if anything is coming up for this for me. Because I know what we're seeing here in the black, by the way, is positive indicators. So these are things that we hope people will do and that would help to build and manage relationships. And they've got these two negative indicators, so things that we don't want to see people doing. So we've got interacts awkwardly or inappropriately with others. Now, I know when I saw that, I thought, well, that feels a bit harsh. Somebody may have genuine reasons why they, fair enough, you don't want to be inappropriate, but awkward. Then we've got another issue, don't we? What do we mean by awkward? Awkward is one of those words that it's not quantifiable. So how reliable is it going to be if we have things that aren't clear? We've got builds rapport. How likely is it that someone's going to know exactly what that means? So anyway, the idea is that if you have a 360 or go through a development center or something like that, you would give a score to each of these behavioral indicators, and you would get an overall score for building and managing relationships. However, new research over the last 10 years has kind of disproved that. And I would say that it's not the first time that research has been disproved in psychology. It does happen from time to time. And what's been shown as a much better form of assessment, more effective and more reliable and valid, is task-based assessment. So just to move on from, rather than just building relationships, this task might be supporting an angry customer. And so here we've got some specific behaviors. Now notice they're not all about relationships. Some of them are about problem solving, some of them are about taking action, some of them are about asking questions. But the task-based approach looks at the whole tasks and what behaviors you need, rather than a competency-based approach looks at competencies as separate entities. Now, we all know we don't use competencies singular. So that's the first thing. It's not intuitive. And the BQF is, someone that champions quality. And I think that there is a huge quality issue here with companies that are still using competency measurement in the old-fashioned way. In fact, a panel that I was watching with some of the main experts in this field was saying that probably the shift will come when there's some kind of litigation. Somebody will challenge it and use this research, and then that will be the thing that kind of changes the whole industry. But at the moment, people pay a lot of money for those competency frameworks, and and they're used everywhere. And I know HR people saying, well, what would happen then? It's going to become so complicated. But accurate, I think we need to get over the complicated and find a way through it in the sake of accuracy. So in case anyone wants to look him up, Dr. Duncan Jackson is one of the key people, and the other people on here. There's lots of different research. The Journal of Applied Psychology is on there. And by the way, I'm happy to share his details or share these slides. So what are the implications? The implications are we need to change the design, scoring and feedback potentially for performance reviews, 360s and assessment and development centres. So everything that we've been relying on as reliable and valid is not so. So anyway, that could be a big, big change. And I think it's something that we can bring in and make leadership development much more effective at the same time. So let me start summarising a bit of some of what we've said and some of the challenges. So in terms of these outdated models, I think we've been living in an era where expert opinion is really valued, and models, and we value complexity. So, I spent a lot of time working with personality tools and lots of different tools. And there's just so much complexity, and we'd be getting these 40-page documents, and I'd be like, yes, we can have a conversation about this, but let's be realistic. How much is someone going to take away from this? Simple models are far better, when we can get to something that's a real principle rather than a theory. The second one is the lack of utilization of peak performance and flow. So huge amount of research in this field. This is something that we really lean on in Business Reimagined. So I'm going to be coming and talking about that a bit more in some of the later slides. And flow has been called one of the antidotes to stress. So again, hopefully we'll be really tackling that. We get these two things of improved performance and reduced stress. So of course, why wouldn't you use it? And the popularity of fixed mindset approaches such as personality tests. This might be a bit contentious, this one, because again, personality tests, people make a huge amount of money giving these tests, but I'd ask yourself, how much difference does it really make in your organization or team? I think people like it and they enjoy it and they think about the differences, but modern research shows that personality isn't fixed. Research by Dr. Benjamin Hardy. So he's got a book, Personality Isn't Permanent. So if you go down that approach, if you actually help people really think this through and gain insights, then we don't have to just think, what am I? Because that's a fixed mindset. That means that we're teaching people that you can't be changed. And yet most organizations want to move into that growth mindset approach. And on this side, reliance on expert opinion. So again, I don't think there's enough of helping people think through ideas. And if you think about traditional leadership development training, you might talk about a theory, then put people in a breakout. They're talking amongst themselves, but they don't necessarily, have the understanding, and they need to use and figure some things out for themselves. But if they've not got the right approach, then potentially they're just talking about ways that are not helping their learning. A disconnect from training and application, and that leadership development focuses too much on skills and not enough on clarity and mental freedom. So this is the gap as I see it in leadership development. But now I want to flip over and start to thinking, so what can we do about that? And really, I'm going to talk to you about what Business Reimagined is doing and some of these approaches and how they've helped us to become a finalist in the last 2 awards. So, 3 reimagined strategies for leadership development. The first one is peak performance disciplines. Flow, neuroscience, pre-psychology, and innate health. I'm going to explain each of those on the next page. But humans are built with some fantastic innate capacities, not theories, things that are really proven to be innate. And by helping people to focus more on those aspects, you can get these huge increases in creativity, in well-being, in connection. So I think that everyone's missing a trick if we're not focusing on those. The second one, introspective learning. This is used a bit in leadership development, but I think it needs to be way, way elevated. So I'm talking about reflection, observation, feedback, and coaching. And the last one, task-based or real world focus. So thinking about how programs actually hit different organizational objectives as well. So one of the things that we're just about to pilot is the leadership development program is going to be focused on the group looking at a continuous improvement issue, finding one, or they may be given some to work on, but actually using that as the vehicle that they can do the learning as well. So again, we're going to really up the real world focus there. But just to tell you a little bit about these peak performance disciplines, some of them, these first couple, you've probably heard more about. The second two, maybe not as much. But what we come back to in Business Reimagined is that understanding trumps technique. So you can give anyone all the techniques in the world, but if they are too stressed or busy-minded or overwhelmed, either to learn it in the first place or to use it when they need it, then, it really negates the point of having it. What we find is that when people understand things differently, that's when they really take it in and create their own insights, and it's a much more sustainable approach. So flow is the optimal state of consciousness where we feel and perform at our best. Godfather of flow was Mihai Csikszentmihalyi in the 70s, but more recently there's work by Stephen Kotler and Keith Sawyer in terms of group flow as well. So looking at when we bring people together, how do we get people in that elevated state and really up performance? Then there's neuroscience, so how the brain functions. And this is creeping in a bit more in terms of emotional intelligence. You may have heard of the amygdala hijack. So we're looking at different aspects of that. But there's lots more that we can talk about, that when we understand how things work, we do better. That's something that we find again and again in our coaching. So these second two areas may be a bit less familiar with. Pre-psychology, so how thought creates our experiences, sometimes known as the inside out. Understanding, this is really key for us, because if we don't even realize that how we see the problem is part of the problem, then there's no point in learning techniques for how to solve it. We've got to first understand how we see the problem. And this last one is innate health, that well-being is our natural state. So when people learn that, we run wellbeing programs that they have no models, no slides. And in fact, one of the programs, it beat 200 other wellbeing programs in a meta-analysis by the government post-COVID. They were looking at the Warwick Edinburgh mental health wellbeing scale, and they asked anyone who'd used that scale in their programs during the period of COVID to send in their results. And yeah, this program beat 200 other programs. So with no models, not even any slides. So just shows you, when you understand things, you will have much, much better results. And in terms of this, I can't help just telling people about my book that I've written, Overcome Imposter Syndrome. So it really starts to look at these peak performance disciplines, looking at all of these aspects as well in a way that helps people connect how they're feeling, and hopefully reducing overwhelm in people and showing them how it connects to the world of work. So if anyone is interested, if you've got ERGs or you're interested in that for your teams, I'm happy to do talks and things. Just let me know. So let's have a look at some programs now. So I'm probably got about 10 minutes left, and then we'll have a good amount of time for questions. In terms of coaching programs, We have a big coaching program been running with a pharma company for 4 years now, that's going really well, that really focuses on this peak performance element. And so they've been going through a lot of transformation. We've coached more than 150 people for that company, and again, people are just saying, I've never heard this before, this is something I can really use at work and at home. So of course, most coaching programs look at introspective learning and task-based or real-world focus, because in coaching, we're asking people to bring their challenges or issues, but they don't typically have that peak performance discipline. Now, when you think about coaching, and if we go right back again to the godfather of coaching, that was Sir John Whitmore, and he talked about two pillars of coaching: awareness and responsibility. So when people are aware, then we give them responsibility to make changes. So that we really focus on that approach as well. And again, notice that's not needing to give people lots and lots to remember and think about, but just that shift in awareness has a huge impact. And that's something that we really help to do in Business Reimagined. So to tell you a little bit about the program that we did, that was a finalist in this year's awards. We coached a management team for a security company. Everybody had unlimited coaching for 3 months, and we were using some different scales to measure effectiveness and to see how much they'd improved their work and their well-being as well. And we had some great results from that. So again, this just shows you another way that we can do things that impact well-being. The next part I want to come into is the group side of leadership development, because group coaching is great, but sometimes we do need group work. In fact, our leadership programs always have some one-to-one coaching, because we know it just makes a huge difference in terms of that pre-psychology learning. So we ran this program with Santander, and this was for the 2023 awards that we were finalists for the Excellence in People Engagement and Development. So program ran from the end of 2022 to the start of 2023. And it was an HR transformation program that they were going through. They wanted some of their high potential leaders to come on and look at how they can help to accelerate the transformation. So we always start with those peak performance strategies. That's really critical to our success. But what I found really, what we've tried to elevate, I would say, is that real world focus. Really, when I look back, and in the continuous improvement world, we want to keep improving what we're working on. And we have really started to increase that real world focus within this particular program. It's called Beyond Limits. In fact, one of the groups that we worked with helped us choose that name, because they said this program helps us to really move beyond our own limits of performance and well-being. But to give you an idea of what we mean by this real world focus, we're working with an engineering SLT, and they were struggling to collaborate. They had a lot of conflicting priorities, and they were having to drive an enormous amount of change. So what we were doing, after teaching them the pre-psychology model and the peak performance model, we were running their meetings as stop-start. So even as they were getting into it, we would stop and say, what's going on right now? Because once people start to see the thought-feeling connection, then we're able to really clear the noise, reduce friction, and ultimately get people into a state of group flow. And the last program that I want to talk about, now I would say that I haven't piloted this yet, but I would love to. This is going to be my next thing I'm going to be talking to people about, because I've been really thinking first line leadership is not where it needs to be. And this comment might not be popular, but I'm going to say it anyway. Leadership isn't difficult, in my opinion. Some people are naturally quite good at it. They've got that kind of intuitive intelligence and they can build connection. What I think is, if you help people give more individualized development to what they need, then you will really increase relevance and impact. So I've just thought about what a traditional 2-day program might be. And of course, programs typically going to have some online content nowadays. So back in the day, or the last time I would have been delivering someone else's leadership development programs for first line, you might have a 2-day program. Maybe there's a couple of hours of online content. So maybe if they're traveling somewhere as well, it's about 16 hours of the workshop and some travel time as well. So about 20 hours that they need to do. My reimagined version of this would be that there would be some pre-work studying where they would learn the peak performance aspects. and they would have a coaching session that helped them learn about their inner world as well. We would have a couple of group sessions where people can either get to know what we're expected of them and set the standards for first line leadership, but then they would be going into some task-based role plays, which would be 1 hour practice sessions where they would be getting immediate feedback from their observer, and that could be an actor, it could be a psychologist as well, role playing. So this could be, like I say, it could be an actor, but it could be a psychologist actually observing some of their real life conversations. So maybe it is a coaching conversation or a delegation or a performance management conversation. So they're really getting real world experience, feedback that's specific to them, no time being wasted. And I think this would be taking about 9 hours per person. So immediately you're starting to see this huge time saving that you would be having. Plus, I think you would be really increasing the relevance and the impact. So yes, you would be saving time. It would be more customized. I think you would get a greater behavioral shift. And again, when we teach people these peak performance principles, they typically say they're life changing. They help them at home as well as work. So we're really helping with that level of overwhelm that people are feeling. So if we're going to reimagine leadership development, and I think we can and we should, then I think we'd be looking at more grounded and inspired leaders rather than overwhelmed. We're looking at practical, individualized development rather than sheep dip and time wasted and not relevant. Clear links to business results and reliable and valid approaches. So if you're watching this and you're thinking, this looks interesting, I wonder if we could try it, you absolutely can. And there's even time to try it and time for the next awards, because the next BQF Awards, the deadline is the end of February. So again, definitely still time to trial something. And if you're interested, then please let me know, because I would love to hear from you. So that is the end of my presentation now. I'm going to stop sharing the screen, but thank you so much for listening, and I'd love to answer any questions that you have.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kay. Lots of theory and research there, and lots of food for thought. So yeah, Rachel's giving you a little virtual clap there.
Thank you.
Virtual Rachel. So yeah, any questions or points for discussion or sort of examples or that you'd like to ask Kay while we have her here? There's a couple of people who arrived while I was there. I didn't say good morning to Fraser. Hi, Fraser. Katharina, David, Katie.
Michael, you can say something?
He's talking, but he's on.
Are you?
Oh, Michael,
we can't hear
you. You can see you're very good lip reading. 1 minute, it says 1 minute. Oh, he's going to type. I think he's typing.
Yeah, or feel free to write in the chat. Anyone, is this feeling similar or different? Again, this is my perspective, what I've seen in my career, but perhaps you've seen something that's working really well, and you're welcome to tell us about that as well. What is your view? What is your view on lean leadership? You would have to help me with that. Oh, thank you, Varsha. You'd have to help me know what lean leadership is, because I'm not sure. We're going to go into mine right now. No, you can write it.
It's probably referring to lean as in lean.
Yeah, that's right. I would guess, but I'm not sure. It's not a phrase I'm familiar with.
Well, you are actually on mute now, Michael, which you weren't before. No, still can't hear you. Something to do with that beautiful background.
Or if anyone else knows what lean leadership is.
Yeah, Alex, you'll know.
I'll just.
Is that
Fraser, you'll know as well.
No?
Come on.
Oh, we got it. Yes.
Got it?
Sounds.
Hey, there you go.
Great. Oh, there we go.
Hello.
Lean leadership. Basically, allowing your team to take on some of the responsibilities that you're already doing. It's like giving up some of the ties that tie you to the tiered management, because obviously there's most corporations run on directorship management and then leadership below that, and there's very easy to get too confused between leadership and management. So rather than actually constantly trying to manage your team all the time, allowing your subordinates, so to say, to become leaders themselves and help you do your job.
Yeah. Well,
Hopefully.
I mean, that seems to make perfect sense. I think, I guess that I would come back to making sure that the people have the responsibility and that they know what they need to do, and that they can do it. But ultimately, I think people thrive on responsibility, assuming it's given to them in the right way. And I think most good leaders should be, over time, giving the opportunity for their teams to learn if they feel that they're going to have the opportunity to step up anyway. So yeah, I think that sounds like a good approach. I have to look it up.
Yes, there is a very good book. It's called Turn the Ship Around by David Marquette.
I know.
Yes.
What? As you were saying it, I was thinking it reminds me of the submarine video by David Marquette. So
yeah, there is a short video on YouTube.
Yes.
About it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. No, that's a really good video.
You know what I'm talking about. That's okay then.
Yes, yeah. Well, of course, because this is the thing. The traditional hierarchical form of leadership looks at one person giving orders. And yeah, in this model, as you mean it now, is about how do we help people have skin in the game. Some people that are doing this really well, there's a book called Humanocracy, which is looking at how do you reverse these kind of structures and operate more in groups. Now, this some of those examples go kind of really far out, but what they have is they've got some companies where the groups operate and they have their own P&L, and so they performance manage as a group to each other. So you can understand that nobody's allowed to slip, everyone supports each other, performance is really tackled there and then, because everyone becomes an owner of the business for the area that they work in. So again, that's taking that to a much bigger level, but that's had some really good results in terms of making sure that people are really bought in. Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Any other questions? Thank you.
Rachel's just popped in the chat.
They're good speakers as well. Those two from Humanocracy, and yeah, I'm sure there's a few things to look at. So yeah, anyone else? Any questions, comments? Yeah, Fraser. Hi, nice to see you.
I'm off mute, and I hope everybody can hear me.
We can hear you.
You can hear me, perfect. So, hey, it's really, really interesting, and thanks for taking the time to walk us through it. It was really good. I'm just curious, and it's probably something that maybe you want to keep your cards to yourself, and that's absolutely okay, by the way. But how are you turning around some of the perhaps more conceptual ideas in terms of leadership thinking and leadership strategy and sort of leadership frameworks, and how are you bringing that to life in separate organizations, and how do you really get that cut through into the audience?
Well, it's a great question, and it's not easy. We have to build a relationship with the clients where there's trust to try this approach, because I remember doing one talk for someone, and when they introduced it, they said, you're going to walk away with lots of models and tips, and I was thinking, oh God, no, this is exactly the opposite of what I'm going to be doing. But anyway, that's fine. We have to try and meet somewhere in the middle where it's practical. We always try and work more kind of one-to-one and with teams. When it's scaled, we always try and add some one-to-one element, such as coaching, because the pre-psychology element, whilst you can understand it conceptually, it's all about how you see it in your own mind. And sometimes we can do group work, and again, the person who you're talking to in group coaching, they're getting a lot from it, and maybe some other people are interested, but there will be people thinking, well, this isn't relevant to me, I don't think like that, I would never ask that question or do that. So adding some kind of one-to-one element, that's part of it. In terms of getting to leadership strategy, we do look, I'm not saying that no techniques, theories, models, or anything is ever helpful. I've come from a long line, and I draw on things. I sometimes talk about the 5 dysfunctions, or things come up. But I try and get people thinking about it in a way for themselves around their business issues. And I think sometimes we can spend so much time thinking about best practice that we forget about just thinking about what's anything that we haven't tried. Firstly, how we even seen the issue, and let's look at the issue in a really objective group flow way so that it's all out on the table. And then what could we do about it? What do we want to do? What makes sense? Rather than going at it from a model's perspective, real, people in the room having ideas, trying them as experiments. So that's why I think as I've got to know more about continuous improvement, I see, there's actually a really great fit for what we do there, because the whole flow experimental point, really seems to fit with the CI approach.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Deb said, I suspect the challenge from some L&D teams would be that 9 hours wouldn't be enough to develop I don't know what that means, to a first line
an individual
leader.
Contributor to a first line leader if there are many foundational skills to cover to be effective. Thanks, Katie. Well, you say that, but if someone's on a 2-day training course, I would argue they probably don't even get 9 hours training. Like, I think, especially what they're even interested in. If I think about when I've run traditional programs, and then you set them off on a task, then you put them in a breakout, maybe you're getting them to each role play, and then you go and talk to them, and they're all talking about what they're going to have for dinner because they've lost the interest, especially by the end of 2 days. So I think if you get 9 hours of really intense training, I think it's going to be way more effective personally than 2 days. And the other thing is that in that pre-work that I'm saying, you should have standards about what's expected. But for a first line leader, this isn't too complicated. What becomes complicated is when we don't understand the inner world, that's what gets in the way. So let me take performance management, for example. So I worked with one of the government agencies one time, and I actually observed their performance management conversations and gave them feedback afterwards. So again, that's a brilliant way of doing training where it's very personal and specific and relevant to them. But they were a lot of economists, and so they were very data driven, and they got bogged down in the data and they missed the human element, and it sounds kind of stereotypical, but there it was. And so no problem, Joe, thank you. And so with this particular group, we were able to answer their immediate needs and talk to them about, this is what we saw in the moment. Tell me, when a person said, I don't know, you moved on quickly after that, but you need to hold that space for them, because I don't know could be I actually don't know, or I don't want to tell you, or anything in between. So really helping people to get better at the attentiveness of relationships. I mean, that's quite specific to them. For some organizations, it might be the other way around, where they don't focus enough on the tasks, So again, it's a balance to be had, but I think making it more individual, people get way more out of it. Thanks, Julie. So yeah, thank you for the question and the comment. But yeah, look, I'm trying things as well. I'm just trying to do things differently, trying to see if it makes a difference. But I'm certain that things can be done better. And I like to try new approaches, and I'm sure some of the people in this call do as well.
Absolutely. I think everybody here is, as you say, that we're all in the business of CI, and that is about finding the waste, removing the waste, and making improvements, and having everybody on the same page when it comes to buying into making those improvements. So yeah, I think you're certainly not preaching to the converted, but talking to people who are definitely open for trying things. And I think it's about interesting how you get that buy-in from the top, and that sponsorship on it, which is a similar challenge we know with all of the work that we're trying to do, right?
And just to think back on this thing about, would 9 hours be enough? 9 hours is getting specifically to someone's issues. Most leadership programs, they don't assess and where are you at as you move into this leadership role. People have all sorts of experience. So I've worked with people that have been coaches. They've coached their local football teams for their kids, and so of course sometimes they've got different skill sets, or they've had other different jobs. And then you know, I just reminded, one of the stories that I didn't get around to in the talk was thinking about competencies, because I was doing a project with a manufacturing company in Wales, and as I talked to some of the team leaders for interviews, the guy, very down to earth, practical, and I won't try and do the accent, but he said, look, Kay, the only time we use competencies is if we're going for a promotion. You know, that's the only time they're ever a factor for us. And so you can see that disconnect between kind of competencies and the business. You know, again, it always stuck with me, that comment. But I think there's a way that we need to help people. I'm not saying that competencies and expectations have no place. They do, but we have to think about how they're used and in what way, so that it's still effective. Any other questions?
Yes. So I'll talk about the competency part of it.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to the competency side of stuff, it tends to be that you're always promoted to your least competent, because obviously you're not competent at that job that you're going to. So how do you kind of manage that?
Well, I think it depends. I think people are capable of a lot more than we give them credit for, and I think part of that is helping people. We're not going to be ready for any job, and especially right now where we've got AI coming in, so we're going to lose loads more jobs. Well, I heard quite a scary statistic on a podcast, which was by 2035, so in 10 years' time, 99% of jobs, you know, will be gone. So again, I don't know if that's scaremongering, but if we're going to have that level of change, then we're all going to really need to think differently about that. So I think we have to get out of this mindset of we need skills and we need competencies mindset, and being able to be clear, like have that clarity in the moment to what's in front of me and how do I need to approach it. And I always used to talk in Frontline Leadership Program. For me, there's one foundational model which I think about as a tug of war, which you've got the needs of your team to feel valued and included, and the needs of the business to achieve their objectives. And that is as soon as you're a manager, that's your tug of war that you just need to balance, or your set of scales that you need to balance. And if you've got the clarity to step back at the moment and just think about those two things, then that's ultimately what helps you drive results. And again, I come back to simple because I think people can remember simple. As soon as we get into competencies, we're adding complexity that I don't think needs to be there. My opinion.
Brilliant. Sorry, I was just trying to look up something. I'm dreadful at remembering stats and figures and quotes and things. But there was one of our ex-members, actually, Arian Cooper Rolfe, who was founder of Involvement, and they used to be very heavily involved in BQF and the awards, and not so much at the moment. They're having a bit of a transformation themselves. But he posted a blog recently about it was after the GCSE results, and it was something to do with skills, competencies, sort of hard skills versus soft skills. And, you know, with our kids, the next generation coming through, actually, you know, the more sort of the psychological approach that you're talking, Kay, actually is that more appropriate and you know, obviously fitting into the whole kind of thing of, you know, exams and academia and whether it's outdated. And, you know, it is, I think it's really, really interesting that, you know, that you mention, and understanding the real life impact it's got to be relevant, surely, if not more important than ticking a box.
Well, I always say, would you rather have someone on your team that has loads of skills but struggles with frustration or boredom or, you know, lack of clarity or anxiousness, or would you rather have someone that's very grounded and has clarity, maybe doesn't have the skills, you know, but is adaptable? So again, that's, and it's not, of course, it's not always a trade-off like that, but that's what I mean. If you get people that can just figure things out. I've interviewed lots of different kind of executives for different work that I do, and when, you know, they've obviously gone up lots and lots of levels, and, you know, when I say what helps you get through that level, they said, well, you know, I talked to people, I found this out, and they do different, you know, they had different ways, but they just figured things out as they went. And if we spend a bit more time on helping people that this is the way that you figure things out. This is the way that you're adaptable, you stay grounded, and you keep moving forward. You check the relevance to the business objectives. You check in with your team that they've got what they need and they're okay. And that's just the balance that you're having to measure.
Brilliant. Great stuff. Really interesting, Kay. I think lots of insight, lots of food for thought, and I'm sure that people will go away and have a think about this, and I'm sure that people will be reaching out to you and say, well, yeah, actually maybe there is an opportunity for us to discuss this further and to look at maybe maybe there's some willing guinea pigs out there who are interested in sort of translating this. I'm not looking at anybody specifically, but no guinea pig looking people. But yeah, I think hopefully, as I say, it's opened up some opportunities for members and for yourself. So yeah, brilliant.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining. Really appreciate you sharing your time with me.
Thank you very much. Everybody have a lovely rest of your day.